This is Conversations on Discipleship with Father Adam Streitenberger from St. Gabriel Catholic Radio and Diocese of Columbus Media.
Welcome to Conversations on Discipleship. I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today is Pat McNulty. Pat is the Associate Director for University and Young Adult Evangelization for the Diocese of Columbus. Welcome, Pat.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super
Great
excited.
to have you. Let's start with a prayer in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we're grateful for all the wonderful things that you are doing in the Diocese of Columbus, how your Spirit has been at work these many years, and how he remains at work in the present. We ask, O Lord, that you bless all of those ministries and lay apostolates in our parishes in their work of the new evangelization. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So, Pat, your position is relatively new in the diocese. We used to have an office of youth and young adult, but sometime back during Bishop Brennan's days, they kind of split that up. But then also, a lot of people don't realize how many higher educational facilities and communities there are in the diocese. So your position was kind of created as part of the evangelization plans of the Diocese of Columbus to address really this need. So just recently, you've come here to Columbus.
Yeah, just came as we're filming this about a month back. So just moved back. I had lived here previously, but yeah, just moved back to Columbus, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And we'll get into kind of more of how you have come here to Columbus and all of those things. But as we always do with Conversations on Discipleship, and I should point out, this is not your first time. This is not your first rodeo.
Yep. This is round two,
as they say. But actually, when you first came to Columbus many years ago, or 3 years ago, you, in fact, we did a conversation on discipleship. I think it was just one episode or two.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, but as per our custom, we like to hear your story, how you came to know the Lord, and how He worked in your life. So maybe you could share that with us.
Absolutely, yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, so I grew up actually just outside of Denver. Grew up in a family that's very devout, very religious family. My dad served on parish council. My mom worked in the parish for a while as the parish secretary. So I was always exposed to the faith, around the faith, all through growing up. But throughout kind of high school, kind of leading through high school, I came to learn pretty much everything about the faith, but I didn't really ever meet Jesus. I could say I knew everything, but didn't know Jesus. So going off to college, I went to college specifically to get a degree. That was the goal. I wanted to get a good degree, then go make good money. So I knew that while I was in college, I didn't want to get distracted from that, but I also knew that I needed some friends. So I was like, well, I still go to church on Sundays, so might as well make church friends because I don't think they'll get me into too much trouble. And from there, just started to encounter the faith and see people who actually really lived out the faith well. And then one weekend, because all my friends were church friends, there was a retreat that I decided to go on. So I went up on this retreat, and there I just realized the gravity of the faith, that either Catholicism is everything or it's nothing. And just in realizing that, I realized I had to make a choice to go one way or the other. I couldn't keep living a life of knowing about the faith and just showing up on Sundays, but not really conforming the rest of my life to it. And so from there, just started to pursue growing in virtue, growing in chastity, and just growing in my life of prayer and getting to know the Lord. And it was a beautiful time throughout college, getting to know the Lord. And after college, I moved on to serve with the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, where I moved to first to Ames, Iowa, and then here to Columbus to serve at different college campuses and encountered the college students there.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I think, maybe we can kind of parse some of these things. So you grew up, did you go to Catholic schools or was it public education?
I went to Catholic school through 6th grade, switched to a public school in 7th grade. So,
and then probably like parish catechesis.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
So as you describe your faith kind of in high school before college and before this retreat experience, it seems like you you believed the things which the church proposes for our belief. Would you? I mean, a lot of people describe that maybe as an intellectual faith. Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah, I think I definitely had an intellectual faith, just, understanding everything that the faith taught. But when it came to seeing who God was, I think I kind of saw him as a giant rule giver. So I knew all the rules, I knew what to follow and what to do, but I didn't really see God as a father. I didn't see Christ as someone who came to give me life. I saw it more as, a set of rules. I remember in high school thinking, I just have to get lucky and go to confession right before I die. And then I'll be set. Like, that was kind of my thing. Was I kind of viewed my life as a giant whiteboard that God wrote down every sin, and then every time I went to confession, he wiped it clean. So I was like, well, hopefully I just strike gold and get to confession right before death, and then I'm set.
And go every day or something like that.
Yeah. Well, the problem was I wasn't going every day. So,
The it's interesting if we can kind of bask in this, this idea of intellectual faith. So I think a lot of people, well, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but there are some people who are well formed catechetically. They're taught the truths of the faith, which is very important, and that helps us clearly, I think, to understand what we're doing and what our faith is about. But there is a sense where, and I think we almost see that. So, for instance, with COVID, when the COVID shutdown happened, so there was at least a 25% decrease in mass attendance when we came back, and that's now like post Omicron kind of. We're still 25% down, and sometimes I wonder that those people, they knew that they were supposed to go to mass, but then they fell out of the habit, or perhaps even something like the trauma of dealing with a pandemic and the shutdown and everything messed with them, that their faith was messed up. And, it almost seems to me that if our faith is just sort of intellectual, that we accept these truths and these principles and these rules, it's very weak.
Absolutely.
I don't know, when you were in high school prior to this sort of deeper faith, through this encounter in your retreat, I mean, did you see that as part of your experience, that it could be weakened or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's easy to show up at Mass on Sundays, but there's definitely a difficulty in following all the truths of the church. And maybe going to Mass on Sundays is the one that you find difficult, but it could be any of the teachings of the church. And when you come down to the moment of choice of, which way am I going to go? Am I going to pursue the Lord and what he teaches, or am I going to pursue, the world and the devil? Knowing all the right answers doesn't get you very far. It comes down to what you care about and what you really are pursuing. One thing that really convicted me is someone once said, the devil is a great theologian. The devil knows all this stuff too. He knows all the truths of the church, but he chooses otherwise. So, we can know everything, but when it comes down to the moment of choice, we have to make a choice to go one way or the other. And the intellectual can only carry you so far. And our faith really is about relationship with Christ. I compare it to, I'm married now, which is great, but it's like I can study my wife and figure everything out about her, but at the end of the day, I actually have to have a relationship with her and stick with her. When difficulties arise, it's not, me knowing things about her that keeps me there. It's that our relationship is strong and founded on something solid.
It also, and something that also strikes me about this too is, I mean, you could kind of we could analyze faith or someone's faith or their story from, sort of a phenomenological study of who they are. But the one thing that we have to always keep in mind is grace, which is something immeasurable. And because I know some people who, were raised in a decent Catholic family. They knew enough about the church's teaching, but they were able really to live a very stellar Christian life, a very virtuous Christian life, despite really having, sort of a subpar, or at least not an optimal formation.
Absolutely.
And I attribute, and they attribute it, in my conversations with them, they attribute it really to sort of a grace, so a superabundant grace that carried them even through that bad formation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, grace is that free, undeserved gift that the Lord gives to us. And I think that, above above knowledge, the question that we should be asking ourselves is, how much am I cooperating with grace and how much am I rejecting it? The day that I came to realize how important the faith was, I was in adoration, but I had been in adoration many times before. I went to a Catholic school where we went to adoration, which was awesome. But, each of those times I prayed a little, but didn't have a breakthrough moment. But that day there was a breakthrough moment, and I think it's because earlier that day I'd gone to confession, and it was the first time in a while that I had gone kind of on my own accord. I have a great Catholic father who would make me go every Lent at least. He would wake me up early on spring break and say, we're going to confession right now. And I didn't have any excuses because it was too early for my friends to be awake. So I couldn't say, I'm hanging out with people. But yeah, so earlier this day, I go to confession. I go of my own accord and have that contrition. And yeah, that cleared the way for grace to be able to work and have that breakthrough moment. So, and yeah, that can carry us through bad theology or bad formation all the time.
And as we come closer to the end of this segment, I did want to kind of bring up something also from your conversation, and we'll probably bring it up into the next segment as well. And that is this idea of one, even with this sort of intellectualized faith, what is one's impression of who God is? So we'll talk about that in our next segment. But if you're tuning in, this is Conversations on Discipleship, and I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today is Pat McNulty. He is the Associate Director for University and Young Adult Evangelization for the Diocese of Columbus. So, I think to kind of bring, to carry this point that came from your conversion story and that we were kind of going to, and that is, so, we might have an intellectualized faith growing up, where we've known the faith, we've been raised in the faith, we know the rules, we know what we're supposed to do. And connected to that, too, is how we perceive God. Now, part of that is, of course, I think connected very often to our relationship with our parents, to our mother and to our father, and how they've kind of raised us in the witness and the example that they've given us. When we were talking about kind of your pre-experience in college, that was really kind of the real point of your personal conversion. You were talking about your own kind of perceptions of God as sort of a rule keeper or a scorekeeper. So maybe you could elaborate, like how do you think you came up with it? Like, how was that image kind of implanted?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure how it was implanted. That's something good that I probably should dig into within my own spiritual life. But yeah, you're right to say that I think a lot of past relationships, whether it's with our parents or friends or other formative people in our lives, can influence that. My dad's a judge, so I think that probably leads to it a lot. And his job is to enact justice. He's a great father, but there probably are definitely times where, maybe he has evaluated me and kind of wiped things clear.
I also think that it's part of it is the intellectualized faith, because I think all of us were introduced to the concept of God, and I think when we're growing up, we have encounters with the Lord. We have these experiences of prayer. We have these experiences of the Mass. I think all of us, as we look back at our life, there are these really profound experiences where we really came to know the Lord. Not just that there is a God, sort of an intellectual, but also that, he is personal and he has intervened in my life. And we see those things. But I do think, especially as we hear in the Old Testament, you can get a perception of God. Or if you even listen to sort of popular culture, popular American culture, there is this sort of idea of God. So I was watching this television series that's supposed to take place in the 1800s, the late 1800s. And there are these pioneers that I'm not going to mention because I don't want to endorse any television series or anything like that. But anyway, there are these pioneers. And some of them are migrants from Europe from fleeing religious persecution. Yeah. And what I found very interesting about this series is even though half of the party is made up of these
Mhm.
zealous religious people who are fleeing religious persecution,
Mhm.
God is absent
Yeah.
from it. Like
Mhm.
he's like they don't turn to him
Mhm.
when, the snakes are coming after them or the
Yeah.
Indians are coming after them or they're
Yep.
afraid of bandits or,
Yeah. Absolutely.
whatever. It's as if, which I find that implausible
Yeah.
because I think that um America, though it wasn't perfect in the 1800s, there was a religiosity about it.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I wonder if we, if sometimes we get that from our culture is this idea that God is distant, that he's not really a part of our life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think pop culture does have that saying of, God is just a rule giver and, go be who you actually are. You should go pursue the world, pursue what feels right to you. That's who you are. And God is there just to prevent you from that, which the exact opposite is true. But when we constantly are surrounding ourselves with the noise of the world, with social media and with music and movies and TV, I mean, yeah, the numbers are crazy how much media people are consuming these days. That's really what's forming the way that you think so much more than the church. If you spend an hour on Sunday at church and maybe a little bit of time here and there reading about the faith, well, you're doing so much more listening to media. So that's really what's grabbing hold and capturing your attention more so. And I think when you have that intellectual faith, there's certain parts of the faith that can't be intellectualized. Like mercy is just something that can never really be intellectualized. So you can't understand the sacrament of confession from an intellectual standpoint. Like you go there and it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that the Lord sent his son to die for us. Like that's not something that you can just grasp intellectually. So I think, especially for me, confession was something hard to deal with because it was just like, oh yeah, God just wipes the slate clean. I get that, but I never understood the basis of it because my faith was intellectual rather than relational.
And I think that's a really important point. Is there are these, we might call them attributes of the Lord, really. I mean, and we might even be able to say they're the divine attributes of God that you really cannot
Mhm.
fully intellectually, or even I would say minimally understand intellectually. And mercy is certainly one of them. And like the Lord's infinite unconditional love for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even in our human experiences, we don't really experience that pure unconditional love.
Absolutely.
So there. I don't know if that would be a good kind of little exercise. Or what are these sort of crucial attributes of our relationship with the Lord that you really can't intellectually understand?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and it, and I think in this whole kind of series, of our conversation has really been focused on this, what we might call intellectualized faith, which
Mhm.
is, and I think another point too is conversion. If my faith is intellectualized, what is the nature of my conversion? Is it that I've been won over to an intellectual argument?
Mhm.
Well, anyone, I mean, I've seen people do some wicked things with logic.
Mhm.
And,
Absolutely.
anyone can be kind of convinced of anything.
Yeah.
But when we talk about conversion, it's not that I've been won over to an intellectual argument,
Mhm.
which is why we can't reduce evangelization to apologetics.
Yeah, absolutely.
But to that point is, no, conversion it's an encounter, which means I have met
Yeah.
this
Mhm.
mysterious person, Jesus Christ, and
Absolutely.
it's moved me. And it really is, it's a meeting and, sort of an event
Mhm.
of meeting Christ that is conversion.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was recently reading a book from a psychologist who mentioned that you can actually implant memories within people. Like if you understand the mind well enough, you can actually get to a place where you can very easily convince someone that something happened. Yeah, which is kind of scary to think about. But the mind it's controllable and it's yeah, manipulable by evil forces for sure. But even that, like our faith, yeah, I hope my faith is more than me. And if my faith is an intellectual faith, then my faith runs out where my
Hmm.
intellect runs out. And even if you're a very smart person, your intellect is very limited in terms of the world. You can only know so much. And so, yeah, faith is something that goes beyond that. A lot of times we talk about faith versus reason, it's not really the question we should ask. It's, reason can carry us so far, but there comes a day where you have to step beyond reason, and that's where that faith, that's where that encounter comes in. More so than just relying on that intellectual faith.
And the whole human person, even though we're a rational being, Homo sapiens sapiens, the wise man, that reason is something very distinctive to the human person.
Absolutely.
Nonetheless, that's not all of what it means to be human.
Absolutely.
Now, there may be some various schools of theology and religious orders who would perhaps burn me at the stake for saying this, but there really is more to the human person than reason.
Absolutely.
And that we do have a will, which is essential to our human condition. Our free will is also something that is distinctively human, but also our emotions and passions, especially as they align to an ultimate good.
Absolutely.
Those desires even are very human and are an essential part of who we are as well.
Yeah.
And to just say that the faith should just hit me in the head, or that we all we have to do is educate people more,
Absolutely.
then that'll do it. Well, that's not going to work.
Yeah, definitely. And the church has always talked about, the three transcendentals: truth, beauty, and goodness, which are all important. And truth hits you in the head. Goodness should hit you in the heart, and beauty should engage your senses and your emotions. And to favor one, I think every person probably favors one, which is okay. But to favor one at the exclusion of the others is to eliminate 2/3 of what is good about being human and involved in our faith.
And it's also, Jesus Christ has become fully human, which means he wants to engage with us
Absolutely.
in a fully human way in all of these areas of our life.
Absolutely.
And in some ways, he's come to redeem all of our human nature, which means all of these areas as well.
Absolutely.
Which is why, Jesus is truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. He is the beauty. There's this beautiful hymn, Beautiful Savior, that it's more commonly sung in Protestant churches, but, it points to the absolute beauty of Christ. And obviously, there's never been a better human life lived than Christ. So, so as we kind of wrap up this segment, this sort of intellectualized faith, which was very much a part of your growing up and everything like that.
Yep.
It brings you to where you need to be, though, in college.
Absolutely.
And you go to the Newman Center there. What was the university that you were at?
I was at Colorado State University.
Okay.
Yeah.
In Boulder, is that right?
In Fort Collins.
Fort
Boulder's the
Collins.
other one.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. Yeah. Are they like your arch rivals?
They are, yeah. So that
You're not
hurt a
even
little
allowed
bit.
to say
Yeah,
who they
can't even
are.
say their name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that in just to devolve into sports? Is that those are like the rivalries, Colorado and Colorado State?
Yeah, somewhat. They're in different conferences now, but it's still the in-state rivalry, so it's a pretty big. They still play every year, and it's a pretty big rivalry. And I was a huge sports fan. I served on the mascot team too, so I was our backup mascot. So I had a lot of school spirit. So yeah, go Rams.
You're listening to the Conversations on Discipleship. I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today is Pat McNulty. Pat is the Associate Director for University and Young Adult Evangelization for the Diocese of Columbus. So, Pat, you were in college at Colorado State.
Yep.
In Fort Collins.
Yep.
And you started going to the Newman Center there.
Yeah.
And it was through that and through the relationships that you kind of had your moment of conversion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you said it was within the context of adoration of the Eucharist.
Yep. Yeah, it definitely was.
What kind of changed in that experience?
That's a good question. I think, I had a realization of this is either everything or nothing. Like, I'm either wasting time trying to go to church on Sundays, or I'm not doing anywhere near enough. This faith can't be some sort of a middle point. And I think just that realization made me think, like, which way does my life want to go? And yeah, in that moment, I knew, like, I can't really describe it, but I knew that the faith was true. So it was like, well, I have to be more involved then. So from there, I mean, it was a lot of small steps. I think a lot of people look to like a St. Paul moment in their life, but a lot of people don't have those, and that's okay. For me, it was, I had this moment in adoration where I realized like this is either true or it's not. And then it was a long period of, okay, now I'm just going to pray for, 15 minutes a day. And then after that, I'm going to start going to daily mass once a week. And then from that, I prayed a little more and then started leading a Bible study. So there's just a lot of little steps that came after that, but that all was kind of inspired from that moment of realization about the faith.
So obviously you were there before Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament.
Mm-hmm.
But was it sort of, did Christ play a role in this moment? Was it, like...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Christ must be the Lord?
Yeah, Christ must be the Lord. And it felt like an invitation. It wasn't like an intellectual exercise that I was doing that was like, oh, this is everything or nothing. It felt like an invitation from the Lord of either follow me or nothing, you have to realize, you're either all in or you're all out. And it came as in the form of an invitation, that prayer, not just an intellectual exercise.
And, I think like in these experiences where the Lord's kind of inviting us or, he's a very familiar voice. I mean, it's a voice that we've heard all of our life in some ways. He's constantly whispering to us.
Absolutely.
And letting himself be known. Like you think at the conversion of Peter on the shore of Tiberias, that he knew Jesus. Like in a sense, Jesus was someone he was familiar with. He may not have known him very, personally or very closely, but he knew him enough to let him onto his boat, to use his boat.
Sure.
So there is a sense where we have a familiarity with Christ, but then he really invites us into something more in these situations. So I think you bring up a really good point, and that is that we have this encounter with Christ, but then we continue to grow.
Absolutely.
And how did you continue to grow? And I would imagine this is where I want to ask the question, is how you met FOCUS.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're definitely linked. So we had missionaries on our campus, FOCUS, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. They send recent college grads to different campuses to serve as witnesses and to mentor college students in the faith. So when I was at school, actually, I had met the missionaries before that retreat that I had the conversion on. And it was actually through them that I really desired to start engaging in the faith more and even go on this retreat. Like, growing up, it was like you go to church and it's like, man, everyone looks like they're at a funeral. Even on Easter, it's kind of a sad, dull place sometimes. But meeting these people, it's like they're alive and they are joyful and they're all in for this. This is awesome. So I'd known the missionaries a little bit, and then after my conversion, got to know them a little bit more. And they just were great in being able to teach me, this is how you pray with Scripture. This is, how you should pray. This is how you should, moderate your life. These are the virtues you should be growing in, and here's how you can do so. So started to walk with a missionary who, cared for me, knew me, and was a good role model in my life.
And how did you decide to make the commitment to become a FOCUS missionary?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'd switched majors at one point in college, and then my junior year I went in for an advising appointment, and they were like, "Oh, you're actually on track to graduate early," which I didn't realize. So I was like, "Oh, sweet." And then I was meeting up at that point with a missionary every week, so I went straight from my advising appointment to meeting up with the missionary, and he was like, "Oh, if you're graduating early, then you should apply for FOCUS. The deadline's this weekend to apply." And I was like, oh, I don't have any excuses not to apply, because I had just found out that I was on track to graduate early. So I was like, all right, I'll apply. The interview weekend was actually like on my way home for Thanksgiving break anyway. So I was like, well, I'll just go. It'll be fun. Just hang out. I don't think I ever had an intention of actually becoming a missionary. In fact, one of my good friends was my roommate. We do, FOCUS does these weekends where you go and you stay and kind of discern throughout the weekend. And one of my good friends was my roommate at that weekend, and both of us kind of looked at each other and we're like not actually thinking about doing this, right? Both of us ended up doing it, which is funny. But yeah, just being on that weekend and at some point I was like, okay, I'm here. I should just, open up my heart to the Lord and say, okay, if this is what you want me to do, I'll do it. And from that, I just started to realize I am pursuing a lot of jobs right now. And the first thing that I look at is the salary. And the second thing is how impressive the title sounds. This joining FOCUS is a chance to have a job that for most people is not impressive and where you fundraise your salary. And maybe that's exactly what I need coming out of college to purify me of that pride and that vanity that I was pursuing.
So you were at Iowa or Iowa State?
Iowa State.
Iowa State. And that was before you came to Ohio State?
It was. Mm-hmm.
So you were just a team member on that?
Yeah, so I was just a missionary at Iowa State. Which is great. It was a good experience.
What were kind of your highlights in that experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was a really fun year. It was a crazy year because that's the year that COVID had hit. So it was a weird transitioning, but I remember just having a Bible study during COVID where I'd started a Bible study in one of the fraternity houses, and then we were all separate now doing Zoom Bible studies. And it was funny. I remember one night one guy didn't come because his all the cows got out, and he was living on the farm. So he had to help his parents get the cows back in, which that's just a funny memory. But I think just being able to build up a Bible study within a fraternity house, and then when COVID hit, knowing that I can provide something that is so important to people that as churches are closing and everything in the world is closing, we can still provide community and talk about the Lord. So yeah, it was a tough year, especially as COVID hit, but it was beautiful to be able to do those things.
And we've had FOCUS Missionaries on here quite a bit on conversations on discipleship and the method, and it's primarily friendship. And you kind of win people over to Christ through that friendship. Absolutely. And then walk them through Bible studies. The first one really kind of goes through the basic gospel message. Yep. But then others as well, and you kind of equip them and form them as disciples. But then also keeping in mind to send them out and that, kind of this missional training. But it's primarily through friendship and Bible studies.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did you end up at OSU?
Yeah, so my time at Iowa State, I had been qualified to be a team director, which kind of oversees an entire team on a campus. The team director at Iowa State had been there for a little while and was staying there, so it was like, okay, you're a team director now, but we need to move you. And I heard that Ohio State was opening up as a campus. My dad actually grew up in Columbus, went to St. Matthias before moving out to Colorado. So I was like, wow, that'd be really cool. We'd always cheered for the Buckeyes because Colorado college sports are not the best. So, to be able to watch a competitive team, we'd watch the Buckeyes. So I was like, wow, that'd be kind of cool. So I mentioned to kind of the regional team I'd be interested in moving that in that direction. And just everything kind of came together, and I got moved out here.
Did your father go to OSU?
He did not, no. Okay. So he moved out in like middle school, and then he actually went to Colorado State as well.
Okay. So you actually applied for the team to go to OSU, or at least kind of tried to talk your way into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I had heard of it, and it sounded awesome, so I was interested. Yeah.
So you came in a rough year because it was shutdown mode.
Yep.
Or at least highly restricted mode. Yeah. When you came in, a team of 4. Yep. 2 guys and 2 girls. How was that year at OSU?
It was great. It was definitely slower going at first than maybe a normal year, just given the constraints that we were seeing. But there's also a lot of beautiful things that happened. I mean, I know of some guys. I had a freshman Bible study, and a lot of the guys just wanted friends, and they were moving to a new city. They didn't know anyone, and most other clubs on campus had just shut down for the year. And so I had a couple guys come into Bible study that I don't think in any other year would have ever come to Bible study, but they just wanted to hang out with people. So, and this was the means for them to come. So to see them actually engage in the faith and really think about it was really interesting. Because, I think we did have opportunities and doors open that otherwise wouldn't have been opened.
And then you left OSU.
Yes, I left OSU. I got married just this past summer, and missionary life is awesome, but it's definitely trying to form your life to fit the life of a college student is challenging. So my wife and I both kind of stepped back. We started doing administrative work for FOCUS, and while I was there, I heard about this role, so I decided to move back out to Columbus, and work here for the diocese.
And you've settled here.
I have, yes. I bought a house. We're having a baby here soon, so we are putting down roots.
Great. Yeah. Awesome. In our next segment, we'll talk about, Pat, what is kind of going to be coming down the road with university evangelization in the diocese. But if you're tuning in, this is Conversations on Discipleship. I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today is Pat McNulty. He is the Associate Director for University and Young Adult Evangelization in the Diocese of Columbus. So, Pat, as we kind of continue, now kind of focusing on your role. So first of all, what do you do for the diocese?
Yeah, so I oversee all of our outreach efforts on the college campuses across the diocese, and I'll also be kind of helping to coordinate young adult ministry. That part hasn't quite started yet. I'm focusing mostly on universities for now. We actually have 25 higher ed facilities within the Diocese of Columbus, which is a lot. And unfortunately, many of them don't have an active Catholic presence on their campus.
What are your priorities? I know you've just kind of started the job, but what are your priorities in this role?
Yeah, right now just assessing what exactly is going on, which campuses are thriving, which campuses need the most support. So definitely traveling around the diocese a lot recently. And from there, the hope is that we build up just a core of students who love the Lord and provide a witness to the rest of their campus. Kind of my time in FOCUS formed me to really think about the way that the apostles would have evangelized, because that was before churches existed. This is before you had a parish hall. This is before you had a building of any sorts, before budgets and finance committees and spreadsheets and all those good things. But what they did is they went out and they met people, and they met them as part of their lives. I mean, even St. Paul spent some of his time making tents just so that he could talk to the other people who were making tents next to him. So just trying to build up a group of student leaders who care about the faith, so that while they're on campus, they're studying, they're also working with other students within their classes, and they can start to show those students the beauty and the gift that the faith is.
That's really interesting, because I think, we think with evangelization and with the new evangelization so much within this sort of Christendom model, this sort of institutional model that, parishes and da-da-da-da-da-da. But there is the opportunity for us to really live on apostolic mission. And there are many parts of the landscape here in America that resemble the very early beginnings of the church, in the apostolic era, in the sense that, there's might be a few people who have heard of Jesus or who are really trying to follow him, but they're a small little group.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they need, in a sense, apostles to reach out to them, to nourish them, to strengthen them, to form them, and to teach them really to attract others. So you talk about student leadership formation, which, it seems like almost every campus, there's at least one student who's really serious about their faith and interested in forming something there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank God that there's at least some students. And the Lord told us not to pray for the harvest, but to pray for laborers. So that's really been my prayer recently, is to pray for more laborers on these campuses that care about the faith and desire for others to know the Lord, and to be able to provide that mentorship for them. But speaking about the kind of the apostolic model, I know I have a good friend who I met him at Colorado State. He was coming to the church, but when he came to college, he had not been going to church for a long time. But he met a girl on his floor that he thought was really cute, and she was going to mass. So he went, and afterwards, there's all these people hanging out. We always had dinner after Sunday night mass. So he stuck around, and then he started hanging out with people, and we actually invited him to a game of basketball, and we just started playing. And it was we were throwing down. It was a really competitive game. People were getting pretty hyped up, and maybe a little too competitive, but it was great. And from that, he just started to realize, man, people in the church are not these boring, lame people. These are guys who actually went out and had a super competitive basketball game, and I'm a guy who likes to compete. That was fun. And then afterwards, they shook hands, and they didn't hate each other either. So there was something attractive about that to him that he really enjoyed. And that's what actually led to his conversion, because he just started coming to the church more often because he realized that those types of people were around. And I think there's a temptation for us to reduce evangelization to, what talk can we give, or, our parish would be better at evangelization if Father gave better homilies or something. But that's not where evangelization happens. Evangelization happens, in your neighborhood, over dinner, or with your neighbors, with the people that living life with them and showing them, hey, look, my life is awesome. My life is joyful. And there's something here that I desire for you, and I hope that you come to desire it over time as well. Instead of just saying, hey, come to this event at the church. That's usually not a great first move, just because church events are sometimes great, sometimes not. But either way, someone first wants to see that the faith is worth living. And I think about it too, a couple years ago, I bought a nice grill, And it took me forever to decide if I was going to buy this grill. Like, I didn't know if I wanted it. It was a little expensive. It was an investment. But ever since I bought it, I like am all in, like I'm trying to learn like how to barbecue better and get new recipes and like always want to be cooking on it. In the same way we think about that with faith, like sometimes we immediately try to put someone into that latter category when we actually have to just sell them on it first. People just want to be sold on, if I go to church, if I practice my faith, am I going to be happy? Am I going to be joyful? Is it worth it? And once someone buys into that idea, then the extra catechesis, the parish events, those things that form us well, those are great because someone's bought in and all in. But we have to first reach those people who have not bought into the faith yet.
Beautiful. So, in your role, so a lot of it now is kind of figuring out where everything is, and the state of things, and then student leadership. So, kind of investing in those that are already present.
Yep, absolutely.
What I guess, and obviously, there's FOCUS and SPO both present in the diocese, so they're great resources. Although it tends to be more focused on OSU, which is, it's a huge center for the whole Columbus metro area anyway, for university students. But what other, areas of growth in university evangelization do you see?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of areas of growth for sure. I mean, a lot of our campuses, unfortunately, were hit hard with COVID, and even the ones that had active ministries have kind of seen that kind of fade away. So looking at even Shawnee State or Ohio Northern or Ohio Wesleyan, these other schools that are pretty decent-sized schools. They're not huge. They're not Ohio State-sized by any means, but there's a couple of thousand students present there who, desire to know the Lord. They might not realize it yet, but deep down they do desire to know the Lord. So, forming student leaders on those campuses to be able to reach them is definitely a huge priority, and I think could lead to a lot of fruit. But I think pretty much every campus in the diocese still has a lot of untapped potential in what we're doing. So it's really exciting.
And, and I know because I'm privy to the evangelization planning process. But, one of the things, so obviously investing more at the Newman Center at OSU, and the work that the Paulists are doing there and that FOCUS and SPO are doing there. But, there's another opportunity, which was very much on the heart of Bishop Brennan, was student housing.
Absolutely.
And coming up with a plan for that.
Yeah, definitely. Student housing would be an amazing resource. So if you're listening and you own rental property in the OSU area, I'd love to be in touch to see if you'd want to rent to Catholic students. But providing a place, this is something that SPO does very well too, but providing a place that people can live their faith out. I think a lot of college students just kind of fall into what's around them. Someone once said to me, like, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And unfortunately, if you're on a college campus living in the dorm, the 5 people closest to you probably aren't living a very Catholic Christian moral life. And so you could easily just kind of fall, unfortunately, into that. Whereas if you live with people who are trying to pursue that lifestyle, everything just kind of becomes significantly easier in the ways that you're trying to pursue your faith. So providing that housing for students to be able to have a refuge where they can come and really grow in their faith is huge.
And, it's an interesting I think it connects to earlier points that we've made, but, Christianity is incarnational. God has become, taken on our human nature, and we continue to encounter him through humans.
Absolutely.
And community is so important. And just as you said, you're the 5 people nearest you. A lot of times I think where we kind of lose sight of God in our life, especially maybe in our college years, is that we don't have that constant reminder. Maybe in the home we did, if our parents were particularly faithful and practicing.
Absolutely.
But, if we're with a bunch of, a bunch of people on our floor or in our house or whatever that don't really believe or don't think of God, then he is going to appear more remote from us.
Yeah, absolutely. Iron sharpens iron, as Proverbs says. So it's important to have those other people around you that are strong, that can pick you up when you fall, and that can walk with you as you kind of go along. And throughout the Gospels, there's no time that anyone is ever sent out alone. Like when the Lord sends out the 72, he at least sends them out with one other person. So they're always in community and they're always with someone else. And as the apostles then branched out to make their travels, they always went with companions throughout all their travels. So there's nowhere within recorded Christianity that people went at it alone. So if you're trying to go it alone, that's not the way, and you'd fade pretty quickly over time if that's what you're trying to do. So yeah, finding those communities around you is really important, and trying to build up those communities on college campuses is definitely a really important priority for us.
Yeah, and as we wrap up our time together, Pat, any kind of final thoughts or maybe even dreams for university evangelization in the diocese?
Yeah, I think the dream is just that, Catholicism becomes a norm. It's almost, my hope is that you can't avoid it when you're on campus, no matter who you are, that at some point you're going to hear the gospel and you're going to have to make a choice whether you believe in it. And that's the hope that every college student, while they're in the Diocese of Columbus, at some point has to look the gospel in the face and make a decision on which way they're going to go.
I have lots of dreams about university evangelization, but I would love to turn the Newport into a shrine to Our Lady.
That'd be awesome.
You've been listening to Conversations on Discipleship. I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today has been Pat McNulty. Pat is the new Associate Director for University and Young Adult Evangelization for the Diocese of Columbus. Thank you, Pat, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is great.
And until next time, peace and all good.
A Diocese of Columbus production in partnership with St. Gabriel Catholic Radio.